Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil, episode 124, the Pregame Show.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world? Do you need more? Does it make sense? Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination. This is the place that will help prime your mind. Now, it's time to heat up the forge, break out the mithril ingots and hammer. Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm your host, Jeffrey W. Ingram. Let's sup from the mug of Java and build. Welcome back. As always, I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller. You sound like a goat right there.
Well, it was because I was being roughed up by the producer.
I can see that.
Who, of course, decided that just as we're starting is the appropriate time to get on my lap. And yell at me.
Excellent. So the pregame show, I laugh at
talk about football?
I laugh at the title because it makes me think of pre-gaming, drinking, and it also makes me think of pre-game show.
Yeah.
As opposed to pregame show.
See, I was thinking it was more of a playoff of like, and next is the football game that we'll be covering here on
the pregame show. Yeah. I was thinking like pregame show, like the game shows that preceded game shows. The shows, shows of games that
when I was a kid,
preceded game shows.
Wheel of Fortune was a pregame show.
Jeopardy. No, it would have been whatever there was before Wheel of Fortune that.
But didn't Jeopardy follow Wheel of Fortune? No.
I mean, because that's a game show, so it would be whatever game or show.
It's like the news.
I don't know. That wouldn't be. But see, that isn't a game show. I'm talking. It would be like us sitting around and doing the actual game, but there's no show. That would be the pregame show prior to the game show.
Changing the rules as you go. This is how not to world build, folks.
All right. So anyway, this is actually not about any of the things that we were just discussing. This show.
What's it about?
This show is going to be kicking off our next big series.
Oh, yes. And yes, it'll be something that will probably come out about an episode a month. And it will essentially be a game where Michael and I will be testing out a part of my world, but my microphone keeps moving, so maybe not.
Do you feel better about it now?
I do not feel better about it. It's a piece of garbage.
The microphone or the world?
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, Jeff has an area of his world. And again, obviously this is, the world that you have built for your book. And we're going to run a piece of that world with me playing a fictional character that we're going to create on the show, and we're going to run it as a tabletop role-playing game, just to test areas or test what exactly do you want to test? Or do you want to, that's actually in the list for today.
Yeah, that's actually it.
So let's start with why.
That's
then.
In the list.
Let's start with why.
Let's start off with why. And we talked a little bit about this before, so I don't want to go into it a lot. But the idea is I want to test out some of the rhymes and reasons of the story I'm doing. There are a few specific things for which I'm specifically testing. This town specifically, which is actually technically in the second book.
Does this town not show up at all in the first book? Is it just referenced at all? Or?
I believe it has to be referenced, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
Actually, I believe he shows up at this town at the end of book one. But you really get into this town more. But I want to test out part of it because it's a little bit different kind of thing. And we get to go through a little bit of the changes in the world. And for people who actually buy the books, too, there'll be some interesting benefit because you get some backstory that doesn't get covered in the book as well, too. Because there's changes going to be happening.
Have you started writing book 2? Or you just
book
have
2,
outlines?
The rough draft is done.
Really? That far? I didn't realize you were that far along.
It takes you years to actually publish your first book. You'd be surprised how much more writing you
get. What's the name of the first book?
The name of the first book is The Steward's Son.
The Steward's Son. So number 2 you have written on the board here is Kemi or Kimi?
Kimi is a name of a town.
Qimi.
That is, I'd say it's an umlaut and I.
Umlaut and I. So
there's a little double space which changes the sound of the letter.
So I'm sorry, is there a space between the Q and the I? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's an umlaut. So you like
the 2 dots over the I. Okay. Yeah,
which indicates there's a different sound to this I than that I.
Gotcha.
Which is why I spell out phonetically next to it, which is Kimi.
Say it again?
Kimi. Yeah.
Okay. I don't think you need the umlaut for that. I still would have pronounced that as Kimi even if there wasn't an umlaut. But in Pregame, it's required. Fair enough.
The letter there are two indications that can change the sound of a vowel. One would be a double consonant, which would make a long I. An umlauted I has a different sound that's always long, so you don't even need a double letter after it. But essentially, it's an I is an I.
Kimmy.
This is a small town that is actually it is a small town on an area that's called the Grand Knights Highway, which is.
Should I write any of this down, or
if you want to, I'll write down anything you feel appropriate. You can make notes of. That is a very important feature of this town.
The highway.
This highway.
Well, of course.
It's a relatively new thing, less than probably 50 years old in the area that you're in. There was a castle built in the spot to overlook the highway. And essentially the highway is one of the few roads in Badrakis. And essentially it is for troops to march north to south. So if you would go north from where you're at, you would be at the city of Climbar, better known to you as Highwall. And if you go further south, you end up sort of more towards the city-state of Saris, which at this time is an independent state of Siren, which is evil. But it's actually really far south. But essentially, the castle's job is to overlook the road to make sure that bandits and other things don't set up along the Grand Knights Highway. And the reason why it's the Grand Knights Highway would be much as you would think, like in European lore. If you see something called a King's Road, that means the king traveled upon that road, which was actually a good and bad thing. It was a good thing because if like the king might go through your town. It's a bad thing because you have to actually pay for that to happen. So a lot of times people would try and like bribe officials to make sure that the king did not come that way. So sometimes King's Roads kind of wind.
Avoid Smithtown. We don't want him here.
Oh, well, we do.
I mean, we love the king, but we can't afford the taxes. Yeah.
Fredstown,
they love him there.
Love him more.
Yeah. We don't deserve it.
We're too small and pathetic. So,
what have we got here? A tavern, a few farms, nothing to see.
One of the neat features
Wouldn't want to bore the king.
One of the neat features of the kingdom of Grimbaudis is that there is no king per se. Essentially, a long time ago, there was the kingdom of Badrakis that was overthrown by orcs. They had kings, and it was because the kings were corrupt. So now you have these people called princes who are elected by their essentially principality, and which are essentially elected by dukes and other noble families, not the hoople heads, but the important people.
And now that they're princes, there is no corruption.
And no kings.
And no kings. Kings are corrupt, but the princes
completely better.
Smell the sarcasm.
And essentially they elect a figure who's actually a relatively weak figure. He only acts as the commander-in-chief, but he does not pay his army. So
the Grand Knights army is all volunteer?
Oh, hell no.
Conscription?
There are knights that are supplied to it from the princes. So the princes have to supply X number of troops depending on what all of the princes consider they should. It'll vary a little bit depending on how wealthy an area is with people and money. But they'll supply either weapons or they'll supply physical troops, or usually both, and food to get them to move. So the Grand Knight has is his own little entourage that he can afford, but they usually do not elect members of great houses into that job because there's always a fear that when someone gains the executive authority over the army, they might end up using it internally, which the princes don't want another king.
Yeah.
It's to protect the people.
So does the Grand Knight usually end up being somebody like either from a non-house or a small, like, do they tend to be
small houses?
So somebody from a more humble beginning than
so like maybe like you're probably not a Duke's part of the Duke's family. You're probably like maybe the second son, because they'll want the first son to inherit their lands. And if the father were to die and you were away, you might your siblings might inherit your land for you, and that's happened and caused trouble in the past.
And correct me if I'm wrong. The Grand Knight, doesn't he relinquish all family
It's not that he
lands or something. I remember something like this.
He has to relinquish his personal holdings.
Okay. Does he get anything once he's done?
Held in trust by someone in his family of his choosing.
Okay.
And that never goes bad, which is usually why it's the second son.
Is that sarcasm?
That's sarcasm.
Okay.
So usually what will happen is even the minor lords will not want the job. So what will happen is their second son will be nominated.
Does it get just appointed, or is there anyone that ever actually wants it?
There are people who want it because if you're an unknown or poor family, you do get some access to wealth and prestige for doing it. Mm-hmm. So they want their family connected to it, but they don't want to risk their lands falling into chaos or trouble. So
they want a cousin or,
like I said, it'll be the second son or a cousin who will actually be put up for it. And then the family will try and take advantage of it as long as they can, sort of think of in England, your daughter marries the king. So you try and suck up all the power you can at court.
Is the Grand Knight a lifelong appointment, or?
It is a 20-year appointment.
20-year appointment. That's a long.
Yeah, but things happen a lot slower. So, they cannot be reelected either. So, but the thing is, this is 20-year because things take a really long time back then. I mean, just to travel from one end of Bedrakis to another end, depending on the stops, it's maybe taking you a year on horseback. You could rush it and get places faster, but if you're moving at a normal pace and you have a horse, it's maybe taking a year to travel the country because one part of the way it's shaped is an L. Mm-hmm. And two, it just, you're going to stop.
You're going to stop along the way. You're going to do things.
And when you stop, it's usually not for a day.
Okay. So we're going to be pretty much staying in Kimmy, though.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, maybe.
Well, the story's going to start in Kimmy anyway. It's going to
start there.
Fair enough.
The character you'll be building already has a job.
Yay! Now, this is interesting to me because there have been other campaigns that we've done where the characters had an assigned position ahead of time.
Yes.
The Gypsy campaign and the Players campaign both come to mind. But even the Players campaign, most of the characters came from very odd backgrounds, so it didn't really matter a whole heck of a lot.
They were odd backgrounds, but was that the actor game?
The actor game, yeah. So, but
this is a very specific.
This one's very specific, so I'm definitely going to be building the character into the story more for this than for prior games.
Yes.
At least that's what I feel.
Yes.
Yeah, you're pushing me towards. Yeah.
And this will be a difference between a normal role-playing game and a beta session is there's a lot more sort of collaboration going on because I need his help doing something specific, so I want him literally in this job, which will be the wine steward for Kimifar, which would be the castle for which the town is around. Or I believe it's Tar. I think I misspelled it there.
Kimitar?
It's Tar because it's a castle. Far is a wall.
And is that
and it might be even spelled in proper Bedrakim, which would put Tar in front of the Kimi.
Okay.
So I'll have to look up that spelling.
Tar Kimi?
Yeah. Or Kimitar, one of the two. Because actually, one of the linguistics differences where you're at from the rest of the country is you put words like wall at the end where that would normally be on the other side if you're in a different part of the country.
So I am the wine steward.
You are the wine steward.
Does that mean is the book about my son?
No.
No, it's the steward's son, not the wine steward's son.
That's right. It's a different steward.
Different steward.
You're actually at a real castle. Like I said, its main job has traditionally been to defend this road. Mm-hmm. One of the things, though, is it's in a relatively safe area. Mm-hmm. You're hundreds of miles from the mountains where the orcs live. You are, probably 1,000 miles or more from the city-state of Saris. Across the sea, not too far away, like maybe only a couple hundred miles, there is another island with Siren. But they don't travel the sea very well. So they're not much of a threat cut off from the island. So it's sort of been we leave you alone, you leave us alone normally. Mm-hmm. And you're far enough from the coast that even if they were to get across, they probably wouldn't get to where you are.
Are the Siren the ones with the blue and the blue? Yeah, okay. Mm-hmm. I remember them. For some reason, I wasn't remembering their name, though. That's why I was clarifying. All right. So tell me about number 3, though. We kind of skipped over that.
Oh, yes. This is a castle for Duke Astner Nonaris.
Are you sure about all that enunciation?
Yes.
Well, I was Azitner?
It's not
Azitner.
No Z.
There's no Z.
No Z.
So what? What do you
As.
say? As.
It's like the short form for a kid would be Ozzy.
Okay.
And then Tner. So Ozzy Tner.
Ozzy Tner.
Mm-hmm.
So Duke Ozzy Tner is how you would pronounce it.
Yeah.
Okay. Duke Ozzy Tner.
And he has a much longer, more not profane, but amazing title than that.
Prolific? Were you shooting for maybe?
Not prolific, but he has a big title. His title is bigger than yours.
Okay. Well, of course. I mean, I'm just I'm a wine steward.
Which means you're not even the head steward at the castle. But the wine steward is a very important job.
Yeah, it's an important position.
For 2 reasons. One,
I make sure he doesn't get poisoned.
You make sure his wine supply is safe and intact in the castle.
Mm-hmm.
So you have control over bits and pieces of the finances of the castle. And 2, it's important because you're pretty much left alone in the basement. You're not surrounded by a bunch of people.
Do I have people under me? Like, do I do this job by myself?
Your job by yourself. This is a small castle.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So it's just me.
I mean, occasionally, like if you need like labor help.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, I mean, wine casks are heavy.
You'll be able to go to the kitchens and grab some of the staff up there or who serve the rest of the castle. Might help if you have a big shipment come in. Mm-hmm. But in general, you're basically in the basement by yourself. You almost always deal exclusively with servants. You almost never see lords where you're at. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a comfortable, safe job. Mm-hmm. Unless the wine gets poisoned and then you get killed.
Yeah, of course.
For obviously working with the enemy, even if you didn't. But so that will be what job you're performing at. It's essentially, the castle is sort of at the center of this town, which is one made the castle kind of pointless because it can't really watch the road very well because it's surrounded by town. And it's a decent sized town, a couple thousand people. So, So for the time period, that's a pretty big town.
How large is the castle?
The castle has a courtyard of maybe 100 yards.
That's
not big.
I was going to say, that sounds kind of big to me.
Big. 100 yards.
100 square yards or 100 yards long?
About 100 yards long, probably about 30 yards wide.
That's still pretty big.
It's not small. When it was originally built, it was kind of important. Essentially, you figure it's probably, the courtyard is probably as long as my house.
Yeah.
The wall.
Your house is considerably less than 100 yards, I'd like to point out.
I'm sorry, I meant 100 feet. Did I say yards?
You said yards.
Yeah, no, feet.
Okay, that is small.
Essentially, in part,
100 yards is a football field.
Yeah. No, you're right. I meant feet. I apologize. There's a bit of distance between that because there are some internal stables, but not a lot. Mm-hmm. The barracks and pretty much most of the amenities are in a 3-story, pretty large keep, but not a super secure keep.
I was about to say, if it's that small, how many people could possibly be in the castle that I would be stewarding wine for? And I would think at that point, just out of size, I would probably run into people.
One of the biggest, no, because you're not alone in the basement.
Yeah, but I got to bring the wine. At some point, I have to bring the wine somewhere.
Oh, no. Kitchen staff do
they
that.
Always. So I'm literally just watching wine.
You're a mini boss. You're a mini boss in that castle.
Mini
when
boss.
You got that word steward next to your name, you're important.
Okay.
Just not the chief steward.
Gotcha.
Probably once you start getting over 60 men, it starts to get very crowded. Most of the time when the Duke uses a castle, he might stay there. There are essentially bedchambers for a family on the second floor. Mm-hmm. The first floor is mainly hall and kitchen. Mm-hmm. And then the third floor is actually a barracks, which is actually on top, which might seem odd, but
it does seem odd.
There are reasons for that. And essentially,
I'm sure there are.
Orcs attack down a lot of times. So the wargs will latch on and climb up castles, and then they'll work their way down. So
putting the barracks on top
makes
gives
sense
you the best defense.
When you're worried about orcs. Yeah. So it helps protect the family. And that is the essential basic layout. Like I said, there's a small stable only for a couple horses inside of the actual area. surrounded by a pretty sizable 15-foot wall, which is a decent size. And this is all a completely stone castle, which is an early stone castle. So it's kind of impressive on that front. They said it was an important job 200 years ago, an important place 200 years ago. Now, not so much. Essentially, there will be changes coming to the castle. That's going to be sort of the story. So we're getting to the biggest problem right now, which is no one knows what's going to happen. It's a nice fortification. What do you do with it? Where does it go?
The castle?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
You can't move it.
Right.
But it's no longer in a strategically important location.
Right.
Outside of chasing off bandits occasionally, and usually they just kind of ignore them anyway because they don't want to go out and chase them. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, the strategic importance of this is gone. Sort of near the border of the Duke's land, there's travel importance to it, so it's not going to go away, but no one really knows what's going on. And this Duke has started going through this process where he's changing things in his land. And so people are kind of nervous because they don't know what that means for them. You could be fired the next day or the day after. You don't know.
Mm-hmm. Duke Ozzy. I'm going to shorten it to.
Yes.
So he's.
Which if you were his friend, you could do.
Okay.
But you will probably never. Well, you might see him, but.
How would I refer to him? The Duke or Sir,
yeah.
Lord?
Mm-hmm. You could
Sire?
call him Duke. No, not Sire.
That's key. That was the kings were sire.
That's right. But you could call him, my Lord.
My Lord. Okay.
From what you know of him, he's very laid back. Usually people just call him the Duke.
The Duke.
Mm-hmm. And
my Duke? Duke?
He's technically your Duke.
No. Would I say that in his presence? Would I be like, yes, my Duke? Or would I say, yes, Duke? Or would I say just my Lord?
You would say either my Lord or my Duke, and he would be fine either way.
Okay.
Normally you would refer to nobility, but he's kind of more of a gruffy people kind of Duke. He doesn't really, from what you know of him, he does not like pomp and ceremony. Mm-hmm. He is actually closely allied with the new Prince of Highwall, or Kleinfar. And
what would they be called? My liege? Your Highness?
Prince.
Yeah. My Prince?
No.
You would say Prince. Yes, Prince.
It's a feudal system. They're not
no
your
Prince.
Yes. You'd probably say my Lord to him.
As well.
Or her. And she's also elected. There was a minor civil war in the area between her and her brother when their father died. And she was the presumed heir from the father, but the brother tried to steal it, or at least that's the story. And so, your Duke was very important in helping her keep control of what her father wanted for her. Obviously for her.
Gotcha.
And, so he's actually an advisor to her.
And she is the prince of.
She's openly she's the prince of Kleinfar.
Kleinfar? Okay.
Kleinfaris. Because the AS makes it a locative, which means it's the land of.
Gotcha.
The city would be Kleinfar, which is where her main castle is.
You were saying about her relationship with the Duke.
Yeah, she's openly affectionate with him.
Okay, so and that is a big deal.
Not in a sexual way, but like
in a familiar way.
In a familiar way, very much treat each other sort of like family, even though they are not related. Mm-hmm. But he is much older than she is, so maybe she treat him as an uncle, or maybe even a father, because she probably did not get a lot of time with her father, and he was essentially her mentor for a long time.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
So the biggest problem for you right now, at least abstractly, would be the fact that what's going on, what's changing, and there's this air of change coming, and he's had some castles that are being torn down. He's had some castles that are being completely reshaped, and they'll no longer even be castles because his lands are really in a really safe place. Mm-hmm. I mean, like the raiders don't even come out this far. I mean, you're just not really civilization at this point because the lands aren't great. They're relatively dry, so the crops aren't great in the area. They do enough to sustain the people, but it's not a huge abundant thing.
So where do I get my wine from?
You get your wine a lot through traders, and there are some vineyards because it is actually a warmer spot. Mm-hmm. So you're further south in the countries, There are good wine lands, except they have to worry a lot about making sure that they get the proper water.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. Without the proper irrigation, you're not growing grapes.
Yeah. There are rivers and stuff like that in the area, but there isn't a lot of direct rainfall in the area, which is sort of the flaw. His entire land is bordered by the sea, but it's this area that they call translated as the Sword Coast, because essentially it's sort of rugged and rocky near the coastline. Think about Maine, like if you've ever driven around the coastline in Maine, where it's very rocky, a lot of jagged rocks out in the water. So there's like no real ports in his land. So there's nothing coming from sea in. And in general, actually, even the fishing off the coast kind of sucks because it kind of drops down deep right away. Not a lot of fish. Some schools will travel to the area at times, but there's not a huge fishing thing in the area. But there are some vineyards in the hills. So wine is one of the important things of the area. It is probably the only luxury type of thing that is produced in the area. Beyond that, it's a lot of mining, really, and subsistence farming. It's really what most people do still. So the things we are testing: the city, the castle, the leader of the castle, and a surprise character that I will not say it. Actually, 2 surprise characters, which I'll probably tell Michael afterwards, so he has a heads up. But I'm not sure.
Do I need the heads up, or?
Yes, in a way.
Because will I need to do certain things to test those characters that you'll need me to do?
Not so much for the ones I mentioned, but for the surprise ones.
The surprise ones are the ones I'm asking about.
Yeah.
Like you'll need me to do certain things to test them?
Yes.
Certain ways? Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
You'll be interacting with them, and there will be certain rules around that for you. I don't want to go into too much detail because it's a bad guy.
It's a bad guy?
Yeah.
I love bad guys. Bad guys are the best. Okay. Well, I already got a few ideas. I know I had previously said that I wanted this character to be cowardly.
Basically just build off of yourself, yeah?
Yeah, not so much. But I think I might be steering away from that now.
Okay.
Some of the ideas I am coming up with do seem a little easy for me to play, but I'm also deciding that I need to change the rules for myself. Generally, when I make a character, as I believe you know, I make it a point to make the character difficult for me to play. I don't necessarily think that is going to be a benefit to this, because the point is not for me to make it difficult for me so that I can have fun. The point is for us to test your world.
Yeah.
So to that end, it might be better for me to play a character that is easier for me to play.
And that's perfectly fine.
So I think I'm going to go more that road. Him being a wine steward, can you tell me, are you deciding an age, like how old he is? Or at the very least, how long he's had the job?
He's probably been in the job for at least 10 years.
At least 10 years. Now, I would imagine, like most trades in this tech level, he probably inherited this from a family line. Like he became the wine steward because of his father and so on. So has his family always served the Duke?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you are from these lands. You've grown up. You know the town relatively well, but you've spent most of your life in the castle. When your father was the steward, you did work with him. When you have a kid, they will work with you.
Yeah. Is any of my family still alive?
No.
No. So I'm all alone.
You are now all alone. You're probably in your 40s, which is kind of old.
That is kind of old.
Yeah. I've not determined whether or not you have a spouse. That's completely up to you.
I don't think we need a spouse. I think that would just clutter the story for the time being.
Yeah.
Let's make it easy on the testing. You figure if I'm in the basement most of the time, there's probably not, if I'm not doing something particular, I would think that he has time on his hands.
Yes, he does. And it's one of the good things about being a steward is if you want to go in to the tavern, you can do that whenever you want to. Okay. Because not only is that something you could recreate at, that's obviously one of your contacts, it would be the tavern owner. So you will have a contact who is a tavern owner. There are a couple in town, but there's one that really serves the castle, and that's probably where you deal with. There are most types of essential shopping in town. So you have access to most types of goods. You might not have the best quality of everything. But even there's like even a magic shop in town where, there's a guy who sits there and he makes usually potions and stuff like that where he sells off and you go pour it on your field and it makes your crops grow faster and stuff like that.
Useful, practical magic.
Yes.
What I'm thinking is that he's
Fireball of Doom.
Maybe not quite paranoid about his position, but overly cautious.
How about this? Maybe he's getting to the point where he's in, let's say, his early 40s.
Mm-hmm.
He has
clock's ticking.
Clock's ticking. He has no kids.
Yeah. So we'd put that as a side motivation.
That could make sense, and that could give you something to be defensive about.
Okay. The other thing I was thinking is I would like him to be you figure if he's got extra time on his hands, and the way I see his perspective towards his occupation is that he takes it seriously and he sees it not only as I'm trying to get good wines to go with good meals, but also I need to secure safety. I need to make sure that whatever I serve is not going to hurt anybody. So he might have the wine brought in for somebody else, but then have it moved to the castle. You know what I'm saying? So that like the wine there isn't an easy chain of goods.
Like if there are 3 casks, maybe 2 go to the castle, but which one do you put the poison in?
Yeah.
If you put them in all, we'll find out before it gets to the castle.
Exactly. Stuff like that. So have him be very cautious about look, if someone's going to take the Duke out, it's not going to be because of me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That damn cook.
Yeah. It's not going to be because of the wine. And let's see what else. So he's got all this extra time. I'm thinking that he knows people in town very well because he's got time to foster those relationships.
And there is a pecking order within peasant society. You are a steward, that puts you at the top. Now, obviously, the chief steward is more important than you. But there is a pecking order within peasant society. You would probably consider most of the peasants in the town beneath you, which is kind of part of the problem. Because if you marry poorly, then, you always want to marry better, but you're in a position where, well,
the people that are above me don't want to marry me. Or
there's very few, like maybe the chief steward in 5 towns over has a daughter at an appropriate age.
Right. So and I'm never going to get the chance to get to know her very well because I'm always in the basement or in
God
town.
knows you don't want to marry an artisan's child because that would tar the family name.
An artisan's child?
Yeah. Like a blacksmith or a carpenter.
Like it's one of the trades. Would I marry just a peasant? Like, would it be conceivable like, wow.
You're all peasants, technically.
No, but I'm talking like a farmer's daughter.
That might be one of those things where a farmer's daughter you would probably be more likely to marry than an artist.
Well, that's my thought. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, because my thought is if they're not one of the trades, I would imagine everyone else is either like fishing or farming.
Not a lot of fishing. There is a lot of, obviously there's lots of farming, but there's a difference. You don't want,
or a herder.
Any
herding, any sort of,
not real herding. It's like some farms will focus on pigs maybe. But in general, it's still a farm, but that's probably a richer farm if they got livestock.
Yeah.
The tough thing is with farming is you would need a farmer's daughter, not a peasant who works a lord's land. And there's a difference.
And so does everybody in this area work my Duke's land?
Like 95% of the people, yeah.
So my pickings are slim. It's kind of difficult.
Pickings are slim.
Well, maybe we should make him a little younger then.
Okay, how about this?
Like 35-ish. Okay. That way he's still young and attractive enough to a young, like obviously if I'm a steward, then at
some point you might get desperate. It's not unheard of because you don't get to travel outside of your land a lot.
That's my point. Yeah. That's my point. Like maybe he does like, oh, well, every now and then I make it a point to go get the wine myself.
Yeah.
Like maybe there's I see the wine cellar as no one goes in here but me. super locked, like kind of paranoid. Dude, it's just wine you've got locked up in there. Who's going to take it? No one's going in there but me. He's like, I'll give you a couple extra bottles to get you through the day. I'm coming back on Tuesday, that sort of thing.
And probably there's a lot of cash that you fill the bottles with. So.
Trying to think what else. So what other things would he, and this is both a question for you and me, like what other things would have him, like what other motivations would he have to just do things? Like obviously, so he's looking for a mate. He doesn't have any family right now. He likes to maintain contacts because he has extra time. So he just every now and like he'll make it a point to like, okay, on, for so many days, I'll spend time on this area of town and see everybody in that. And then another week I'll go to the other side of the town and I'll see those people. Maybe could he bring wine out? I mean, the wine I would think is coming out of the Duke's money.
It's the Duke's wine.
Okay, so it's not like he could really
you might
float some freebies out there. But but see, the thing is,
that's a character decision.
Well, here's my thought: is if he's got like just like what you're saying, like there's extra, like if you're bringing wine in, you don't want to serve it until you know for sure it's safe. Well, it's kind of a rotten move. But what if you're going to take some of the wine and either give it away or sell it locally to make sure no one gets poisoned, and then, okay, this stuff is good. Now we'll serve that to the Duke.
Because remember, there's no king, so there's no more corruption.
So would I not be this concerned about that? Like, is this school of thought over too much?
You're worrying too much about it because the thing is, it's all the thing, and technically, all right, if they inventory it, you can get in trouble if there's things short.
Here's a question.
But if he never runs short, they're never going to look at it.
Here's a question then.
You might even sell some of the stuff on the side to make extra coin. I'm not saying that's a character decision.
Yeah, but here's a better question. In all of the time that all of my family has been doing this, has anyone ever been poisoned or gotten sick from the wine?
I would say probably at some point.
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay. So it is still a concern, something that you'd be like, well, you want to make sure everything tastes good. You want to make sure that know what they're going to be serving that night. So you match a good wine to it. And you always got to be careful of poison.
Yes. And one of the things that might be important to your character too is there are still some important cities way to the south of where you are. So there's probably kind of a steady stream of actual like caravan kind of merchants that are passing through. Yeah. And so that would probably be something else important to you. You'd probably want to have a way to ensure that you know when they're in town and you can try and suck up to try and find a damn mate. You have 30 daughters. Excellent. I'll take 2. Is that legal? The game master didn't tell me.
What about, would it be conceivable that my character could get the education on poisons?
Oh, most definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So then maybe I would have a number of ways that I could test wine without killing someone to find out if it's poison.
Yes. I mean, unless you want to kill them, that's a character choice.
I know. I'm just saying. I'm trying to think of ways, like, I see this character as being a more intelligent character. So I'm trying to think of, like, what would he do to make himself really proficient at his job and make sure.
You'd probably have at least a rudimentary understanding of poisons because, or at least their effect upon wine. And you could potentially have a pretty thorough knowledge of poison.
Well, I'm thinking he would go to the trouble. It might be difficult for him to get the information because of where they live.
But there's a magic shop in town.
Fair enough.
There's access to that kind of information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then he would definitely do that.
I mean, you probably would know like the top 3 most secret, deadly.
Right. I'm not. I don't know what the League of Assassins is.
You don't know how to make iocane, poison. So,
iocane. We were just watching that the other day.
Yes.
Sniff, but do not inhale.
I forgot that line. Brilliant line.
Brilliant line. Is it, how do you, what?
Yeah. That movie had several.
Yeah, that movie had a great deal, many good lines.
Yes.
You seem a decent fellow. I hate to kill you. You seem a decent fellow yourself. I hate to die.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other ideas about the character that you want to, like you don't want any, say or influence on specifics?
There's one thing, but we will not be seeing that on there.
Because you don't want the audience to know. Is it something that they'll get to know?
Oh, probably.
Is it a physical characteristic?
No.
No? Okay.
No. It's not a characteristic about you. It's about interaction with one of the NPCs.
One of the secret ones, or
the secret ones.
Well, we already discussed that rule will come into play.
Yes, but that's the only thing else. Beyond that, if you'll probably have questions for me, like, do you think this is appropriate?
Oh, I'm sure I will. I'm sure I'll have. But that's what's different for the listeners. If you guys are going to be testing your stuff, like this part of the process, I'm realizing now, like in the moment, I'm realizing how important this is, because the character that I was going to create is completely different than what I'm going to build now. And
you probably would also have some martial skills.
Would I?
Yes, because remember, this is not Downton Abbey. This is 1,000 years before that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little bit more.
Never watched the show.
Okay, so it's not your prim and proper peasants, with the village. And
it's medieval.
Things are still developing. Yeah. Oh, no, it's not even medieval. It's Iron Age. Mm-hmm. So essentially, you're just starting to get some of those.
Well, when I use the term loosely, like when you say it's a medieval setting, people think castles and swords and what have you.
Yes, which they've had pretty much since like Egypt. But yes.
Don't get smarmy with me, Jeff.
I can't help it.
All right.
One of the things to keep in mind is, if you travel the roads, they are dangerous. Mm-hmm. And you've probably, especially as a kid, had to travel the roads. Mm-hmm. Knowing a bow, you probably would not have sword skills, but probably dagger skills, maybe staff skills, definitely probably bow skills. Because especially when you're younger and you weren't the steward, you did stuff to help support the family anyway.
Okay.
You probably won't be proficient at them unless it's a character design.
Okay.
And don't get me wrong, too, you can get your throat slit by some wandering person from a different country who thinks you look ugly.
It's the things I look ugly?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And
so I won't be marrying that person.
It's a character choice.
I know you slit my throat, but will you marry me?
I'll get better.
All right. Anything else you want to cover? Or are we getting into the wrap-up?
We're into the wrap-up. So quickly, we are testing a few things out. We're testing out a city, a couple characters, and we're going to have some fun doing it and hopefully deliver a story that is interesting. If you don't find it interesting, please let us know, and I'll kill his character.
Which I assume you're going to do anyway at some point.
Well, the question is, do I do a 30-episode slow torture death of your character? You're like, oh yes, I scream.
Well, it seems appropriate to me that if you're going to have this city be in book 2, that you kill this character in book 2. You just maybe unceremoniously, a little background, little blip. Oh, that could have been the wine guy.
Mm-hmm. It could have been.
Depends on how good the character comes out. We'll see.
Yeah,
I'll try to make him interesting. I try to make him interesting.
Yes. And we'll try and deliver an interesting story. This is sort of a new idea for us. I mean, for trying to deliver a story in this way.
Yeah. You know what I think we may want to do is maybe skeleton the story.
Yeah.
Like, so that we are both aware. Normally, the GM
is completely aware.
Yeah, you'd be completely aware and have a little more than a skeleton, but maybe I should be aware of it so that I don't go too far off the beaten path for the sake of, mostly for the sake of time and for the listener.
Yeah, that's true.
Because obviously, if we were just going to play this as a normal game,
it would take 7 years.
It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter. Yeah.
I still have yet to leave the room. I attacked that piece of straw on the ground to get XP.
I know. I know the door is glowing and looks shiny and wonderful, but I'm not going to open it.
There's nothing behind that.
All right. So what's the world builder task of the day?
Okay. So pick a place or a thing that you want to test and pick people who you want to test it with. It's going to be fun. You're gonna enjoy some laughs across the table from each other. And you get back some valuable feedback where they're like, oh, that was horror? Really? I didn't know that was horror.
Horror.
That's not how they pronounce it, though.
Okay, but it sounded like you're saying horror. That's what it sounded like what you said.
Well, that could be scary depending on where you're at.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure the clarification of what word you were using. I'm like, that was horror? What? Oh, horror. Horror.
We see where Michael's mind drifts.
Yeah, and where your enunciation goes.
Yeah, blame me.
I blame you.
Blame the messenger for the message. Okay, so you get the real world task this week.
So the real world task this week is start working on your beach body because the summer weather is steadily arriving.
Did I explain to you my new technique?
For building a good beach body?
Yeah.
What's your new technique?
Mind over matter. So if you believe that cinnamon bun
Yes.
has a nutritional value of a pound of spinach, it does. Because your mind is more powerful than matter.
There is a small amount of truth to that, but it's only a very small amount. Like, you really got to believe.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. My
when I come back from vacation, I'll be like,
I don't know. I don't know how much. I mean, Sarah, Jeff is very well aware. My wife Sarah is. I could go through a whole bunch of things to list all the things that Sarah is qualified to do, but suffice it to say, to make it brief, she has a degree in nutrition and she is a Pilates instructor, but she has been in the fitness world for 10 years. So she can be a personal trainer. She's certified to do that. So she's really up on healthy eating and how to take care of your body and what have you.
I'll have to ask her to find out if she really understands.
Well, there was a trainer that she worked with that I always talk to the trainers whenever we go to where she works and hang out. Like, I get to meet and make friends with other people and what have you. And this guy was talking about a way of training where I don't know if it was the pre-workout food or the post-workout food. As long as you ate it in a certain amount of time after a certain kind of activity was done, he said it does not matter at all what you eat in that window. Thank you. And there was another trainer who comes from an old school training, methodology where she was like, no, you have to eat this. You have to eat vegetables and protein and blah, 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 blah. And he's like, you want to make a bet? So they're like, okay. He's like, here's what we're going to do. He's like, we're going to measure our body fat index and we will train for, I don't know, maybe a month or 2 months or whatever. And he's like, during that window, you eat what you're going to eat. And he's like, I'm going to eat whatever I want. So he would do the workout and they would do it at the same time. Yeah. He would come, he would have 2 Krispy Kreme donuts and loving it, of course, cause it's
a double love.
Yeah. Cause he just, busted his butt lifting weights and doing a bunch of cardio, whatever. And here's this woman who's eating carrots and rabbit food and hating it. Yeah. And he's like, yep. And his body fat index lowered, hers maintained. So not only did she struggle and she was eating, I mean, don't get me wrong, he was eating well also.
As well, yeah.
But in these windows, he was eating garbage. Just because it's it doesn't matter. He's like, your body is burning at such a high rate in that window that it doesn't matter what you consume. He's like, you can have chicken and vegetables. That's not going to hurt you. He's like, but if you want to have Krispy Kremes, that's fine too. And he proved it. He's like, ha, science.
Well, I was watching a very interesting documentary on food. And
shocked. Which one? Because I've watched a number of them. Fed Up?
Sugar? No. It was one where he's talking about basically how it was there's an episode called Fire, and they were talking about how we evolved the firing of food, like cooking with fire, and what that actually does physically to the
nutritional value of the food.
And what we lose. And they talk a little bit about the industrialization of food and how you add in ingredients and there's problems. There was a nutritionist there that said, I don't care what you eat. Just make it yourself. He's like, if you make it yourself, you will not gain a lot of weight.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, the real easy thing to do if you're going to the supermarket to buy food. I mean, Sarah and I actually purchase food at a number of different places. But if you're going to the supermarket, your basic rule is stay on the outskirts of the building. You go into produce,
ice cream.
No, Jeff, no. Produce, and then the
cinnamon
meat.
Rolls.
No, Jeff. The outskirts of the supermarket tends to be where you find the produce and the meat and the fish, and then the dairy. And even dairy, you can pretty much eliminate dairy. Yeah. I mean, there's not a huge benefit to dairy
post childhood.
Post childhood. I mean, you can get all the calcium you need out of broccoli. You don't need to get it from milk. The only other things in that department you can get is your eggs, obviously. You don't need cheese. I put cheese on almost everything because I love it. But everything in the center aisles, everything in a box, in a can, in a jar, with some exceptions, obviously some things that are packaged that way aren't bad for you. But most of that stuff is terrible. It's all just prefabbed, super processed food that does not do your body any nutritional value. And it kills me. I'm such a food snob and a judgmental food snob. When I'm at the grocery store, just a couple days ago, we shop at Aldi's now too. And this guy, I was joking with him, but I did kind of want an answer. Mm-hmm. He had so much food in his carriage. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it was literally a mound up above the carriage. Yeah. And I said to him, my gosh, man, what are you shopping for a group home? Because there was that much food, but not only that much, but the quantities of certain things. So like he had like 7-8 loaves of bread. Mm-hmm. You know, how many people go out and buy 7 or 8 loaves of bread?
Where are you shopping? What day of the month it is?
Well, okay, but that didn't seem like what was going on here. Mm-hmm. It didn't look. This didn't.
It was like loaves of bread.
This didn't.
You're buying cans of beans,
right? Yeah.
Like
so you know, there was 5 dozen eggs, 5, mm-hmm. and tons of other stuff, and so much snacks, which is what made me think group home. Mm-hmm. And he's like, "Oh no, this is just me and the kids." You know, and I probed a little bit, talked to him for a little. Nice guy. No longer with the kid's mother. Mm. So it's him, and we're talking 2 teenagers.
Yeah.
I thought he was going to say 5 or 6. Mm-hmm. And I said, how fast will you burn through all this? He's like, oh, this is like a week. A week? 7 loaves of bread for 3 people in 1 week. And he's like, oh, yeah, you should see breakfast. He's like, we'll each get like a dozen eggs. A dozen. When's the last time you ate a dozen eggs in one sitting by yourself? Never. No help.
Yeah.
I was like, these people are eating way too much food and not the right stuff. Like it was so much carb laden, like flour based and sugar filled.
If you eat sugar, I'm sorry, yeah, sugar.
Yes,
just eat it raw.
Sugar. Just have lots of sugar.
Sourdough bread. Mm-hmm. And actually, if you like read on it, and there's like just 3 ingredients: flour, dough, water. Mm-hmm. You will not have the carb issues that you have with the carbs that you're eating.
Yeah, just sourdough bread.
Just sourdough bread. 3 ingredients. That's all you need. Maybe a little bit of sugar's in there, something like that. But
I'll try to avoid that.
But you know what I'm saying though? It's like that's the way bread was made for 150 years. Those issues did not exist that we have today. People are not allergic to gluten more than they used to be. People are eating bad gluten because the metabolical bonding that needs to happen can't until it ferments, and it only ferments when it turns into sourdough. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's change the real world task of the day. And I'm going to say, go watch some food documentaries because you will learn so much about being healthy and things that it's not dramatic lifestyle changes that you need to do.
Mind over matter.
Don't listen to Jeff. He has no educational background in nutrition. Please don't listen to Jeff on this one. But
I am stubborn.
Be that as it may, if you want a cinnamon roll, go for it. Unless you're a diabetic. Jeff, what's the tease for the next episode?
Okay, the tease for the next episode is microclimates, evolution, or stagnation.
Before we close it down, let me ask a question. When do you think we'll have the next episode that will be related to this one regarding the campaign and the testing?
The middle part of next month.
Middle part of next month. Mm-hmm. Okay. So like 4 or 5 episodes from now, roughly?
Roughly 4.
Roughly 4. Okay. Yep. Thanks, guys.
And as always, make sure to go to gardul.com. That's GARDUL.com for the show notes. They'll be under podcasting, World Builders Anvil. That's a great place to get all of the information from the episode that you've just listened to and to see all the resources that we've talked about in this episode. Thanks for joining us this episode of the World Builders Anvil. Please be sure to rate and review us in iTunes, and please help get the word out to your friends about our show. And join me, Jeffrey W. Ingram at Gardul.com to see the progress of my world and learn why I made the choices I did. And please contact me and let me know the topics you would love to hear in the future. Now strike while the myth rolls high.